So we can work with multiple modules. Instead of having one big app module, we could split that into an app module that defines our app component. And then we have, in this slide here, two separate new modules, so-called feature modules. Now, the term feature module does not mean that you create them in a special way. It's still a class with the @ng-module decorator. It just means that this is a module that groups together components, directives, pipes that are used in a certain feature area of your application. Like in this slide, when we're building, let's say, an online shop, we could have components that are primarily involved in rendering products and individual products, and we could outsource those into a products module. And if we then have an area in our application where we're primarily concerned with orders, then we could also outsource that into our orders module. Now, that is an important step of Angular application development. Splitting your app into such feature modules, because that is the prerequisite to performance improvements we'll dive into later. And that also now ensures that when other developers work on your code, or you work on your code, maybe after a short pause, you quickly know where to look for the setup for this specific part of your app. Because of course, you could be building an application with hundreds or thousands of components and directives, and then grouping them together into logical modules makes working with them and refactoring your code simply much easier. Now let's apply that to our course project where we also have multiple features. Which features do we have in our course project there? Well, if we have a look at it in our app folder, I'd say we have three main feature areas. We have the recipes feature area, so all the components related to recipes. We have the shopping list feature area with all the logic related to the shopping list. And we have the auth feature area, where we have all the components and all the logic related to authentication, even if in this case it's only one component, but still, it's a separate feature. The header and the shared components here, I'd say these are not really features of the app. The header is part of the app component. We do render it there, so it definitely belongs to the root of our application. And regarding the shared components, in this app, we might only use certain features in certain parts of the app. Let's say the alert component, we only use it in the auth component. But it would make sense that we share that across different features of our application, because you could be showing an alert in the recipes area as well when you fail to load recipes. So the alert and so on, these shared things we'll take care about later. They're not really a feature module of this app. But let's dive into creating a module for our recipes then. And for this, in the recipes folder, you simply create a new TypeScript file, and you would name this recipes.module.ts. Just as we have the app module for our general application, so basically the core setup for the entire app, we now have the recipes module that should be responsible for defining the building blocks of the recipe feature area. And for that, you simply export a class here and name it recipes module. That is the naming convention here. Just as you named a recipes component, well, recipes component, you now name the recipes module, recipes module. This class now needs a decorator, and you can probably guess which decorator that is. It is the ng-module decorator. ng-module is imported from @AngularCore. Now the ng-module decorator takes an object which you pass in to configure that module, and there you now can add basically whatever you also added to the app module. So since we're talking about the recipes module here, we, for example, will add declarations and add all recipes-related components to this recipes module. So if we have a look at the app module, we got the recipes component, the recipe list and detail and recipe item component, and also the recipe start and edit components. All these components, I'll remove them here from the app module and move them into declarations of my recipes module. So let's grab these here as well, like this. That should be it. Let's remove the line breaks here in the app module. And of course, in the app module, we can now also remove the unused import statements here. of all these recipe-related components because we don't need to import the types into this app module file anymore if we're not using them here. And now, therefore, in the recipes module, we need to add the imports. And here, the IDE might be able to help you. If you get something like a light bulb here, you can simply let the IDE import this. Otherwise, simply add these import statements with the correct paths on your own, of course. So I'll quickly add them all with the help of my IDE here. Can also use all missing imports. And now we made a first important step towards our recipes module, but actually not one that will suffice, not at all. How can we now use our recipes module in the app module? Now, as a first step, since I declare all the recipe components here, we could simply add the exports array to the recipes module and export all components which we declared here so that we can not just use them in the recipes module, but in any module that imports the recipe module. And that could be the app module. So here, now I cleaned up the declarations to kind of bring them back. They are now declared in the recipes module. We now have to import the recipes module here. So simply add recipes module to the imports of the app module. And of course, make sure you also add that import statement here at the top, which is not to be mistaken with the imports down there, by the way. This imports array in ng module is there for Angular to add features of other ng modules into this ng module. This import statement up here is a TypeScript feature to tell TypeScript where to find this type, that it sits in another file. It has nothing to do with Angular. Now if you save all of that and let the application compile, and I try to go back to the app, I actually get an error. Router outlet is not a known element. And this error is stemming from the recipes module recipes component. And the problem we have here is that in the recipes component, I am indeed using router outlet. The problem is router outlet is a directive provided by Angular, and it's not magically available in the entire application. It is made available by the router module, which I import here. This is not just there to configure our routes, it also adds routing features like the router link directive, which we use to add a link, or the router outlet directive. Now, I export it here in the app routing module, and since I import that in the app module, this router module and its features are available. Now, you might think that then it should also be available in the recipes module because we kind of add recipes through this routing module here, right? We go to the recipes route through the help of the app routing module. But this is not how it works. Instead, as I mentioned, and this is really just something you have to memorize, everything in a module works standalone. You can export something to then be able to import it into another module, as I'm doing it here with all these components. But that alone does not mean that in this module, in the recipes module here, you can use features that are made available in the app module. You can only export something which then is usable anywhere else. You don't automatically get access to other content. So the recipe module and the components in there got absolutely no access to all the things we import into our app module. So things like the routing module, but all the forms, that all is not available in the recipes module, and therefore we get this error. Now, how can we fix that? Now, to fix that, there are a couple of ways. One way would be that we simply import the router module like this, without for root, but just like that, and also add the import statement up there, into our recipes module. If we do that and we go back to our application, now we still fail because of app recipe item that uses ng4 and doesn't have access to that, but we don't get that routing error anymore. Now, still we get an error. And this error is related to ng4. Here, the same logic as with the routing applies. You don't magically have access to all these core Angular features. You did thus far because we had everything in the app module. We declared all components in the app module, and we have important imports here in the app module that import core Angular features into the app module, and therefore any component declared here has access to these features. Components declared in other modules don't. And for example, ngIf and ngFor are provided by the browser module. All the forms related things are provided by the forms module or the reactive forms module. HTTP related stuff is imported by that HTTP client module, though this is kind of an exception. This only provides services and no directives or components, and services work differently and therefore are indeed available application-wide, even in modules where you don't add this. But as soon as you use something that's not a service, and I'll come back to that services thing later, as soon as you use something that's not a service, but that offers real directives or any features you use in templates, as soon as that's the case, you only have access to what you import. So to be able to use ngFor in the recipes module, besides the router module, we probably also need the browser module. However, this is now just a special case, and the only special case. The browser module must only be used once, and that is in the app module. Because it does more than just add ngIf and ngFor, it does some general application startup work that only has to run once. Instead of the browser module, use the common module in all other places, in all other modules where you want to get access to ngIf and ngFor. So here you add the common module, and that is imported from @angular/common. Now with that imported, we unlock ngIf and ngFor. And therefore now if we save this, we again get an error, but a different error. This time the problem is the form group directive. And as I mentioned, well, you only have access to what you import. We're not importing the forms module, or here actually, the reactive forms module, because we're using reactive forms in the recipes area. And as soon as we do add it though, and of course for that you also need to add the import statement up here from @AngularForms. As soon as we do add this, we can save this. And now we see that it finally loads again and our application runs again. And if I log in, I can indeed go to my recipes, I can fetch my data here, and that all works. Now we outsource this into a separate module. And the core takeaway you absolutely have to understand is whatever you declare here and whatever you use in the templates of these components has to be imported in that module. It's not enough if you import it in the app module. The only exception to that rule are services. These only need to be set up once in the app module, and you can access them in your whole application, even in components which you added to feature modules. But anything that's used in a template, so components, directives, pipes, these things need to be declared or imported into the module where you plan on using them. It's not enough to use them in another module, even if you export your things to that other module. Even then, it's not enough. Angular treats and parses every ng module standalone.